My husband always kept his wedding ring on. But one night, he forgot it on the sink. Curiously, I looked inside, and noticed a tiny engraving. It wasn't my name. My blood ran cold as I Googled it, and found a woman's memorial page. Heart racing, I messaged her family. Their reply sent shivers down my spine. That's impossible. She died years ago. But her husband vanished the same day. That's when I knew, my husband was hiding something terrifying. I, 36 female, never thought I'd post here. But what I found out 2 weeks ago has completely changed everything. I haven't been able to sleep. I've barely eaten. And I can't look at my husband, 38 male, the same anymore. We've been married for 8 years. Together almost 10. No major red flags. Just, normal stuff. He's quiet, works with HVAC systems, loves grilling, football, and beer. Not super emotional, not a huge talker. We live in Asheville, North Carolina. Life was predictable, and honestly, I liked that. He always wore his wedding ring. Never took it off. Even when I told him it wasn't safe at work, he'd smile and say, "This thing's not coming off for anything." I thought it was sweet. But one night, everything changed. It was a Thursday. I remember because I was folding laundry in the bedroom while he took a shower. He came out, got dressed, and went straight to the couch. Nothing unusual. Later, I went to the bathroom to wash my face. That's when I saw it. His wedding ring, sitting right on the edge of the sink. Wet. Like he'd just slid it off before drying his hands. That alone felt weird. He never forgot it. Not once in 8 years. I picked it up to put it back on his nightstand, and that's when I saw it. An engraving. On the inside of the band. "Forever yours, MS." I froze. Who the hell is MS? My name isn't even close. First or middle. We'd picked our rings together at a tiny shop in Boone. We had our initials and our wedding date engraved. That was it. This wasn't the same ring. It looked like his, yeah. Same metal. Same size. But it was heavier. The design was slightly different. More worn. My hand started shaking. I felt sick. I sat on the floor of the bathroom and just stared at it for a long time. I didn't sleep that night. While he snored in bed next to me, I was wide awake with my phone in my hand. I started searching. I didn't even know what I was looking for. I started with MS memorial ring. Then I added engraving, wife, husband, and finally forever yours, MS. Eventually, after a few hours, I landed on an old memorial page. The name hit me in the gut, Melissa Sanders. Died in a car accident in 2013 in Tennessee. She had a daughter. The little girl died too. It was heartbreaking to read. I kept scrolling, and then I saw it. She is survived by her mother, brother, and husband, who was never found. What? The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I clicked the brother's name on the tribute page. He was listed as the person who managed the site. There was a contact link. I stared at it for probably an hour. Then I wrote, "Hi, I'm sorry if this is upsetting. I think I may know someone connected to Melissa. I'm not sure, but if you're open to it, I'd really appreciate talking with you. I know this sounds crazy." I sent it. I didn't tell my husband. I didn't sleep. I barely spoke the next day. He didn't notice. He just asked if I was feeling sick. I said yeah. The brother responded the next day. I remember my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. "That's not possible. Her husband died with her. That's what we were told. Are you saying he's alive?" My blood went cold. That's when I knew. My husband wasn't who he said he was. At least not entirely. I didn't know what to believe. I started replaying every conversation we'd ever had. When we met in 2014, he told me he'd been traveling around for a bit. Starting fresh. Said he didn't have much family left. Claimed to be from Ohio. I never pressed him. We all have baggage. But now it felt like the ground under me was shifting. I still hadn't confronted him. I started going through our documents. His social. His ID. Everything looked fine on paper. Except there were no photos from his life before me. None. Not one. I'd asked about it before, and he said he lost everything in a house fire years ago. I believed him. But now, I felt like a fool. I searched for Melissa's husband. There weren't many details. No name listed. Just that he disappeared after the crash and hadn't been seen since. I looked up crash reports from 2013 in Tennessee. It took hours, but I found it. A black Honda Accord. 2 fatalities. The woman was driving. Heavy rain. Lost control. No mention of a third passenger. But something stuck with me. The car was found unlocked, and there were 2 coffee cups in the front seat. 2. 3 days later, I cracked. I waited until after dinner. We were watching some dumb show on Netflix. He was laughing. I felt like I was looking at a stranger. I muted the TV and just said, "Who's MS?" He blinked. "What?" "Your ring. The engraving." "Who is MS?" He stared at me. Just stared. I've never seen someone's face change so fast. The color drained. His mouth opened like he was about to speak, but nothing came out. I pulled the ring from my hoodie pocket and held it up. "This isn't the ring we picked out. I found this on the sink." "Who is she?" He didn't deny it. He didn't lie. He just sat back and whispered, "I didn't think you'd ever find out." He said her name softly. "Melissa." I sat still. I didn't want to breathe too loud. He didn't make excuses. Didn't try to spin it. He told me Melissa was his wife. That they were married for 4 years. That they had a daughter. That she died in 2013 in a car crash. And that he had been in the car. But here's where it gets worse. "I wasn't supposed to be there," he said. "We had just fought. I was staying with a friend. But I came back that night because I missed her. I convinced her to go for a drive so we could talk. We argued in the car too. She was angry. I was too. Then he stopped talking for a while. Just stared at the floor. She drove off fast. I begged her to slow down. It was raining. I should have taken the wheel." He said he blacked out. Woke up in the woods, 50 feet from the crash site. No broken bones. Just bruised. Stunned. Cold. He said he watched the ambulance and cops pull their bodies out. "I thought about turning myself in," he whispered. But something in me just snapped. I ran. Ran. He left his wife and child dead in a car and ran into the woods like a ghost. Changed his name. Started over. Met me a year later. I didn't speak. I was just numb. I wanted to scream. But I couldn't even cry. He got up and tried to touch my hand. I pulled back. "You let her family think you were dead." "I know. You wore the ring all this time." "I never stopped loving her," he said. "But then I met you. And for the first time I felt alive again. Like I was forgiven." "Forgiven?" I stood up. My chest felt like it was going to burst open. "You built your second chance on a lie." He looked broken. But I didn't care. I left the house. I didn't know where to go, so I just drove. Ended up parked behind a gas station crying into my steering wheel like a crazy person. I had a message waiting from Melissa's brother when I finally checked my phone. "Can you send a photo of him?" My stomach flipped. I sent one. He replied within minutes. "That's him. That's Mason. Mason. Not Alex. Not the man I thought I married." The brother said their family thought he might have killed her. He didn't believe it, but others did. That's why the funeral was closed casket. There was damage to her face from the crash. Nobody ever saw the husband's body. The cops assumed he was thrown from the car into the river. No one checked further. He told me Melissa's mom still cried for answers every week. That she used to sit on the porch for hours thinking maybe he was alive and would come home. I came back home the next day. I needed answers. He was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of whiskey. Looked like he hadn't moved. I asked him straight up, "Did you hurt her?" His eyes shot up. "No. God, no. I swear. We fought, yeah. But I never hit her. Not once. I loved her." "Then why didn't you go back?" He started crying. "Because I was a coward." He told me he was scared they'd think it was his fault. That they'd blame him. That he didn't want to face her family. So he ran. You don't know what it's like to wake up and see your family gone. Knowing you might have stopped it. I thought maybe if I disappeared, it'd be easier for everyone. "So you punished them by making them grieve 2 deaths instead of 1? He had no answer. I couldn't sleep that night. Again. I went to the garage to get some aspirin from the backup medicine cabinet. That's when I found a shoebox in the storage shelf behind some tools. Inside, photos. Old ones. Wedding pictures. Hospital wristbands. A tiny onesie with the name Madeline stitched on it. And a letter. It was addressed to Rachel, me. I couldn't stop shaking as I opened it. It was dated 2 years ago. In it, he said he had a second family before Melissa. A girlfriend in his early 20s. A son. He didn't include a name. He said he left them too. I dropped the letter. My vision blurred. My hands started sweating. My throat closed up. How many people had he walked away from? How many secrets had I married? It's been 3 days since I read that letter. I haven't said anything yet. He doesn't know I found it. I've been playing along. Cooking dinner. Sleeping in the same bed. Pretending. I don't know what's scarier, that he kept all this from me, or that part of me still wants to believe he's a good man. But something else is nagging at me now. What if there's more? What if Melissa's family wasn't wrong? What if he's not just a coward? What if he's dangerous? Would you like me to continue? There's a lot more I can build on here: legal trouble, confrontation with Melissa's family, her brother showing up, or even a darker past being uncovered. Let me know how deep you want this to go. You said, add more story twist, but still keep the details consistent. ChatGPT said, absolutely. Here's the next installment, keeping all previous details consistent while turning up the suspense, emotional weight, and psychological twists. Simple words, vivid storytelling, and still in the Reddit true story tone. No resolution yet, just more darkness creeping in. 3 nights after I found the letter in the shoebox, I stopped pretending. I confronted him again. I laid the letter on the table between us and said nothing. He stared at it. Didn't ask how I found it. Didn't even look surprised. Just whispered, "You weren't supposed to see that." "How many families did you walk away from?" I asked. "How many lives have you disappeared from?" He didn't answer right away. Just poured himself a glass of water with shaking hands. Then he dropped something I still haven't processed fully. Madeline wasn't Melissa's first child. What? She was mine. But not hers. He explained that before Melissa, he had a relationship in his early 20s. Her name was Alina. She got pregnant. They weren't stable. He left before the baby was born. He said he didn't want to be like his own father, angry, violent, useless. But instead of becoming different, he ran. Years later, after he met Melissa, he reconnected with Alina briefly. That's when he found out Madeline, his daughter, had been put in foster care. Alina had gone off the grid. He tracked the little girl down and fought to get custody. That's when Melissa stepped in. Helped him. Became her mom. "Melissa saved me," he said. But I still ruined it. I sat there, numb again. Because everything was starting to feel bigger. Too big. Like a giant hole in the ground that kept opening wider every time I looked closer. I went digging again. I searched for Alina. Nothing. Not on social. Not on people finder sites. No death records. No recent activity. I tried court records. There were some custody filings from years ago in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Same area as Melissa's crash. Filed by Mason S., same last name he gave me. But there was something else. An arrest record. Minor, but still there. Domestic disturbance. 2010. The woman's name? Alina Weston. I printed it out and brought it to him. His face turned to stone. "It was a mistake," he said. "I never laid a hand on her." But I could see something shift in his eyes. Like a part of him had just shut off. "You keep saying you're not that man. But your whole life says otherwise." He said nothing. This morning, 2 plainclothes officers showed up at my door. They asked if Alex, Mason, was home. I told them yes. They asked to speak with him. I called him downstairs. They were calm, professional. Said they were following up on an old missing persons report related to Alina Weston. I froze. He stood at the door, hands in his pockets, too calm. He told them he didn't know where she was. That they hadn't spoken in years. That she'd moved away and cut off contact. They asked to come in. He said they could. They sat in the living room. I watched from the kitchen, pretending to wipe down the counter while I listened. Then one of the officers asked, "Can you confirm your whereabouts in April of 2013? He stuttered. I was in Knoxville with Melissa." The officer nodded. Then asked, "And before that?" Silence. My stomach was in my throat. He couldn't answer. They left after a few more questions, saying they might follow up again. He messaged me again tonight. "My mom wants to meet you. He says she's been having nightmares. That she's convinced Mason, my husband, did something to Melissa. That she never believed it was just a crash. She swears Melissa had called her that night, crying, saying she was scared. That Mason was acting strange. She had planned to leave him. That was hours before the crash. But the worst part? There's something we never told the police," the brother wrote. Melissa's mom found a note hidden in her sock drawer a week after the funeral. It was torn and stained. It said, "If anything happens to me, it's not an accident." No one ever found out. She was too scared. Too ashamed. Afraid no one would believe her. Now they want to reopen the case. I'm scared. Not just because of what I've learned. But because Mason has started acting different. He's quiet. Too quiet. Keeps checking the locks. Walks around at night. Sleeps less. Drinks more. Looks at me like he knows I know too much. And last night, I swear I saw him standing outside my car, in the rain, at 3 a.m. Just, staring at it. I watched from the window. He didn't move. Didn't flinch. Eventually, he walked back inside, soaking wet. He never said a word about it in the morning. It all came to a head last Saturday. Everything, Melissa, Alina, the missing persons report, the letter in the shoebox, the cops, the nightmares, the staring out in the rain, it all boiled to the surface. I couldn't keep pretending. I called Melissa's brother. Told him everything. He asked if he could come by. He wanted to confront him. He said he had the note Melissa wrote. I told him yes. I had no idea what I was inviting into my house. He came that afternoon. Brought their mother with him. She looked worn down. Not old, but tired. Like someone who'd spent the last 10 years screaming inside her own head. I asked Mason to come downstairs. Told him we had company. He walked into the living room, saw them, and froze. Not a word. Not even a breath. Melissa's mom stood up. Reached into her purse. Pulled out a folded piece of paper, brown, torn, barely holding together. She placed it on the table. "You remember this?" she asked. "You know what this is?" Mason's face turned pale. Like he'd been stabbed. He sat down slowly. "That's not what you think," he whispered. "It's exactly what I think," she snapped. "She wrote that because she was scared of you." Melissa's brother jumped in. "You told the cops you weren't in the car. You told her you were staying with a friend. Which is it?" Mason looked at me. "You told them everything." I didn't respond. "Melissa was leaving you," I said. "Wasn't she?" Silence. "You couldn't handle that. You didn't want to lose control. So you got in that car and drove it into a goddamn tree." He stood up fast. No. No, it wasn't like that." His voice cracked. He started pacing. She was crying. I just wanted to talk. I didn't mean for any of it to happen. Melissa's mom walked up to him, stared him in the face, and said one word. "Murderer." He broke. Dropped to the floor on his knees. Started sobbing. Ugly, animal sobs. "I didn't kill her. I swear I didn't mean, she was speeding, I told her to slow down, she went too fast." He looked at me. "Tell them I'm not a monster. Please." I couldn't say anything. Because I didn't know anymore. The cops came back the next day. They had more questions. This time, they didn't leave right away. They took him in. Not arrested, yet. But for formal questioning. They said the new evidence, the note, was enough to reopen Melissa's case. As he walked out the door, he turned to me and said, "You were the best part of my second life." I didn't respond. I shut the door. The house feels empty now. Not peaceful. Not quiet. Empty. Like someone ripped the roof off and let all the warmth float away. I still haven't moved out. I'm sleeping in the guest room. His stuff is still here, clothes, shoes, tools. I don't touch any of it. Melissa's family calls now and then. They say thank you. That they always knew something wasn't right, but no one ever listened. Melissa's mom mailed me a photo last week. A picture of Melissa holding Madeline. Smiling. You can't see her face in detail, it's blurry. But her eyes look just like mine. That messed me up more than anything. It wasn't just a betrayal. It wasn't just a lie. It was a whole life I wasn't supposed to be a part of. I'd asked myself 100 times, what if he never left that ring on the sink? What if I never picked it up? Would I still be living in that illusion? Sleeping next to a man who built his world on the graves of others? And here's the worst part. Some nights, I miss him. Not the real him. But the version I believed in. The version who made me laugh on bad days. Who held me close after my mom died. Who made Sunday pancakes and kissed my forehead while I worked. But that man never really existed. We're done. I filed for separation last week. I don't know if they'll charge him. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. Either way, he'll have to live with it. And so will I. I started seeing a therapist. She says I'm grieving a person who was never real. That it's normal to feel anger and sorrow at the same time. I told her I mostly feel hollow. She said that's a start. I've learned something through this, not all monsters hide under beds. Some sit at dinner tables. Kiss you goodnight. Say I love you with your favorite song on the radio. The scariest part isn't that they fooled you. It's that you believed it. I'm not hopeful yet. Not really. But I'm awake now. And that's more than I was 2 weeks ago.